Hey, how you guys doing? It's producer from Brothers Comics. Welcome to the Who Day Over 40 podcast for long time, long suffering Cincinnati Bengals fans. Who Day, everybody. 85 days until kickoff, where the Cincinnati Bengals host the New England Patriots in Paycor Stadium. Again, FYI, I will be there, me and the Goat Killer. So stop by and say hello if you see us at one of the tailgates. So we're still counting down to kickoff as we get into this Bengals offseason. We are in that dark period after the last OTAs. The Bengals announced today the training camp schedule. July 24th is the first day of training camp. And then, or until then, absolutely nothing. You're not going to get anything. Of course, there has been some Bengals news. T. Higgins signed his franchise tender today. There was a little bit of goofiness with the wording of it by a couple of the reporters, but he did sign the franchise tender, and that's what we're doing. So, like we did for the previous podcast, we're counting down the best 85s or players that by the Bengals that wore the number 85. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're already going to see who I've already picked here. There's not going to be any um, surprises at the end or anything like that. But, how we get to that point, I think I can be able to explain myself as to why I feel that this particular person is the true 85 and the best one to ever wear it. But this is something that we're going to do that's a little bit differently than before. Whereas before we went over a lot, pretty much all the players. For this one, we're going to go over a lot of the players that did wear 85 in the early parts of the days of the Cincinnati Bengals, but then we're going to primarily concentrate on the five dudes that pretty much kind of solidified that number. And it really kind of shows something that the Bengals have messed around with and should have gotten done. That there are certain numbers for the Bengals that shouldn't be worn. One being 78, obviously, for Anthony Munoz, and then the other one being 85, which, again, that most people associate either with Isaac Curtis or Chad Johnson. Those numbers shouldn't be worn. And what we're going to see is that even after Isaac Curtis and then after Chad Johnson, there's going to just be some pretenders that wore those numbers, and it should have never happened. Now, I know the Bengals have done, a good job about getting the Ring of Honor up and going, and that is a good thing. Both Chad and Anthony Munoz are both in the Ring of Honors, but I think maybe that they should actually have those numbers retired. 78 should definitely be retired. There should, I mean, it happens every preseason. If you watch the preseason game, there's like 100 dudes on the Bengals team or 90 or whatever the number is now. And there'll be some offensive lineman out there wearing Anthony Munoz's number. And it's just sacrilegious, to be honest with you. There's no reason that any other player should be wearing that number. And 85 probably should have been that same way pretty much after Chad left. Now I know there's going to be a couple of players that wear that number after Chad that actually did pretty well, and they're gonna come up on this list here. But more than likely, between Isaac Curtis and Chad Johnson, after Chad left, for his sabbatical in New England, and then the shenanigans in Miami, the numbers should have been retired. And even if they're not going to retire the numbers like officially, just put it in the mothballs where nobody can get access to it. I think that's probably the best thing that the Bengals could do with both of those numbers. And this conversation should be had later on about number 18, you know, for AJ Green. And if the path holds the way that it's holding, maybe number 9 and number 1 also should not be worn by anybody on the Bengals anymore either, But we'll get to that point later on, hopefully after a Super Bowl win. So let's get into it. All right, these are the other 85s, y'all, and we're going to go through a few of them. You've probably never heard of these dudes before. I know I haven't. These are a couple of pre-born me Bengals players. And when the 85 was actually worn on the defensive side of the ball, Martin Baglio, 14th round pick out of San Jose State, great player, 1.5 sacks in his total career. Danny Brabham, he was drafted by the Houston Oilers in '63, and then he played one season with the Bengals and has no recorded stats. So yeah, these are not the dudes I'm talking about that brought glory and honor to the number 85. But these are the 85s that before we get to Isaac Curtis, and we're going to get to Isaac Curtis here in a second. And then Isaac Curtis is going to wear that number for quite a while, from 1973 to 1984, first round pick, 15th overall by the Bengals out of San Diego State. Okay, so in the previous podcast, I talked about my love of, the scrappy white wide receivers for the Cincinnati Bengals. Your Steve Kreiders, your Chris Collinsworths, your Pat McAnally's, even though he was the punter too. Isaac Curtis was like my favorite Bengals player pretty much up until probably Boomer and then maybe Chad Johnson. Like, and I was a huge Chris Collinsworth fan, don't get me wrong. But Isaac Curtis is like the establishment player for the Bengals, and he really played well for the Cincinnati Bengals for many, many years. He should probably be in the Hall of Fame. And again, I base everything on the fact that the Hall of Fame allowed bum ass Lynn Swann to be in the Hall of Fame. He should not be in the Hall of Fame at all. He's only in because of the Super Bowl wins. Everybody knows that he was a good ambassador and he speaks so well, or whatever words you want to use to describe Lynn Swann. But if Lynn Swann is in the Hall of Fame, Isaac Curtis's numbers are better than Lynn Swann's. He has more career receptions, has more yards, has more touchdowns, although the touchdown totals are kind of close. But if Lynn Swann is in, how is Isaac Curtis not in? Again, they both kind of grew up or played in the same era where, throwing the ball was rare, but nobody's ever going to confuse Lynn Swann for being a better wide receiver than Isaac Curtis. That's just ridiculous. Now, again, the Bengals made it right. They made him and put him into the Ring of Honor. Again, the Ring of Honor, long overdue for the Cincinnati Bengals to actually have, but he's probably a Hall of Fame worthy player based in that era. Now, were the teams for Isaac Curtis successful? No, that is the problem. That is the real problem. It's the same problem that Ken Anderson is running up against getting into the Hall of Fame too. His numbers are Hall of Fame worthy based on the previous players that went in before him, but because he didn't win that Super Bowl in 81, all the other stats go out the window. And that's why he's been, wallowing in the executive committee or whatever for all of these years, even though he could probably get in. And Isaac Curtis isn't even that far in that process. He hasn't even gotten, that kind of consideration. But a four-time Pro Bowler, again, if bum ass Lynn Swann is in the Hall of Fame, Isaac Curtis should be in the Hall of Fame. And that's all there is to it. All right. So after Isaac Curtis moves on, Tim McGee is drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals plays for the Bengals from 1986 to 1994. First round, 21st pick out of Tennessee. A super solid career for the Bengals. And, I remember Tim McGee. He played on some good offensive teams for the Bengals, even though they might not have been overall successful. He's on the Super Bowl team. He plays with, Eddie Brown, Chris Collinsworth near the end there. Rodney Holman is the tight end. Boomer is the quarterback. Like, I mean, he played for or with some pretty good offensive players, and he put up really good numbers. And when I was looking this up, I was really surprised at how good his numbers were because I didn't think they were that great. But 287 catches, 4,700 yards, 25 tutties. I mean, he had a 1,200-yard season in 1989. Like, Tim McGee is a very solid player for the Cincinnati Bengals, or was a solid player for the Bengals. And, he comes in wearing that 85 after Isaac Curtis does and actually gives it, you know, at least a respectable showing. Because as we're going to see here in a little bit, some dudes that got the 85 did not respect it. And again, the Bengals should have never let and also ran a garbage player wear that number. Like, if you didn't think that dude was going to be any good, then tuck that number away and make him wear something else. Like, nah, son, like, you can go ahead and wear whatever number. I don't even care. But you wear that number because you're not wearing 85. You're not worthy of it. And the Cowboys have done this too. They have their best wide receivers, where what is it, the number 80, I think, for the Cowboys. If you're the best wide receiver on that team, it's a tradition that you get that number. Okay. And the Bengals maybe could have done that after Isaac Curtis, only recognizing like, yo, you are worthy of this number and you are going to wear, you get a chance to wear it. But or you just again you mothball that damn number. Just don't let anybody get to it, and that's probably what should have happened. But the Bengals again a little slow on the uptake sometimes, getting to these things, and hopefully moving forward as right now nobody's wearing the 85, and we'll get to the last person award here in a second, but maybe in the future here nobody should be putting that number on. All right. So before we get to Ocho Cinco, a couple of pre-Ocho 85s. Again, if you're on YouTube, you see the garbage cans up. We've done this for the first 3 days of this kickoff countdown. James Hunden from 96 to 99. The name kind of sounds familiar, but again, in that lost decade, whatever. I'm surprised I didn't get a couple of snaps, honestly. Lavelle Boyd in the season 2000. Between the two of them, 28 receptions and 4 touchdowns, all by Hunden. So 4 seasons of football, 28 catches, 4 touchdowns. Garbage, just absolute garbage. Again, should never had seen the 85. I had to be some other numbers that those dudes could have wore that were not that number for the Bengals. All right, so let's get to Chad Johnson here. Yes, all the primary stuff that we talk about. Second round pick, Oregon State. He's 6-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first was first team All Pro, 751 catches, almost 11,000 yards, 67 touchdowns. Chad Johnson's a Hall of Fame player. Even in the modern era where they throw the ball all over the yard, him just being short of 11,000 yards and 751 catches, it should get him into the Hall of Fame. He's not going to get in. He has a couple of foibles in his post Bengals career. There's the domestic violence charge and the the reality shows like that kind of stuff. It didn't help him at all for his Hall of Fame chances. But outside of that, a very good dude and very good for the city of Cincinnati. So there's nobody under the age of, I would say, 30 that isn't, or that didn't live in Cincinnati, that's a Bengals fan, that didn't become a Bengals fan because of Chad Johnson. It's all about the Ocho. It really is. He brought the Bengals to a national level. He was loud, boisterous, the celebrations that, they get talked about. And then he was really, really good before he became Ocho. Okay. Like he was a really good player. You've seen all the videos, the sleeping in the stadium, I want to be better than Rice, the working hard. He was that dude, especially when him and Carson Palmer had it cooking there for a few seasons. There's nobody that has represented the Bengals in this modern era, and I would call that anything post Marvin and on, from 2003 on, better than Chad Johnson. He gives back to the city. He represents the city. He pumps up the players. He is a Bengals fan, even though he's not playing for the team anymore. Nobody barely remembers that he played for the Patriots, and definitely doesn't remember that he had that short cup of coffee in Miami. Like, he's associated with the Bengals as well he should be. And again, a lot of people get lost in the guarantees and the celebrations and all of that, but people forget that he was a really good player. I believe he led the AFC in reception in yards for like 5 seasons in a row. I mean, an absolute beast of a player when properly motivated and focused. Again, the latter years, it did fall off a little bit as he started to become more interested in being Ocho Cinco than Chad Johnson. And those last couple of years were rough, which wound up getting him, shipped out of town. But in his prime, which he was in Cincinnati, just a great player, great dude, a great representative of the Bengals, all of that. And nobody under a certain age is a Bengals fan if they didn't live in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, Ohio, or whatever. You grew up someplace else, you became a Bengals fan, it's because of Chad Johnson, period, point blank. So, again, when we get to this ranking of 85s, my answer is going to be very, very clear. He's the first NFL jersey I ever bought. It's Chad Johnson, period. There's no other answer to this question. And again, nobody should have wore 85 after this. Why in the hell did the Bengals allow somebody to wear 85? It just makes no sense. And again, never follow a legend, Armand Benz. If I'm Armand Benz, there's no way that if they're digging numbers out of the crate, or even if Chad is my favorite player or was my favorite player, there is no way in hell that I'm wearing that number. And I think Armand Benz went to Cincinnati, the University of Cincinnati. So he, of all people, he should have known better than to grab that number. Nah, dog, give me something else. And again, I know it's a little limited this time. The NFL has become much more liberal in the idea of what numbers that wide receivers can wear. So I know there was only a select number of select numbers available. But man, oh man, I'm staying far away from 85 if I'm Armon Baines. That's just crazy. So he had one season with the Bengals, 18 catches, 210 yards. I think he had one tutty. But seriously, just this is garbage and trash. Should have never happened. And that's all there is to it. But after that, man, you should retire 85. Nobody should wear 85. Blah, 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 blah. I said all of that for the last 15 minutes. Okay. Bengals draft Tyler Eifert in 2013 out of Notre Dame. First round pick. The year after they had already drafted Jermaine Gresham, which we'll be doing on tomorrow for 84 days to kick off. It's like, man, why do they need another tight end? They already just drafted Gresham. Gresham, like, early Gresham seemed pretty good before all the false starts and the holding penalties. No, Tyler Eifert was a different animal altogether. A receiving tight end where you finally got Marvin dragged knuckles and scraped all into the future here. Like, hey, you know what? Tight ends don't just need to block. They don't have to be, Tony Stewart, Daniel Coates, of the world. They don't have to be these dudes. They can actually be something else. They could actually go and catch the ball. Like I remember he drafted Chase Kaufman a few years ago, and he was like, literally a non-inline tight end that could line up in the slot. It's pretty much what the Bengals are about to get with Mike Gesicki. No, we can't do that. And you got to go make him a blocker. Well, he's not a blocker. And Tyler Eifert wasn't either. He could do enough, but he was there to catch the ball. 185 receptions for the Bengals, 2,152 yards, 24 touchdowns, 13 of them coming in 2015, which is his one Pro Bowl season. And honestly, that's kind of where it starts to go south. Who gets injured at the Pro Bowl? I'm pretty sure one of the reasons that they don't play the Pro Bowl anymore is because of the Tyler Eifert injury. He injures his ankle foot at the Pro Bowl and misses the entire next season with that injury. And then it's really just a laundry list of other injuries after that. The elbows, the shoulder, he missed the season because of a separated shoulder, like the elbow dislocation. It's just, when on the field, an absolute game changer. In my opinion, if he stays healthy with the other receivers that the Bengals had in 2015 and Dalton doesn't break his thumb, the potential that the Bengals would have been a Super Bowl contender / winner, because he was that dominant, and the Bengals offense that season was that dominant too. It's just you hate to see it, because he was literally somebody that was unguardable at times. Passes down the seam in the red zone. I mean, with his height, his catch radius, his ability to, like, it was a wrap. But it's just the injuries, man. Like, they just piled up and piled up and piled up. When he finally did come back and was finally healthy enough after the 2019 season, I mean, he was a shell of himself after all the injuries. I mean, and who, of course he is. You can't go under the knife all that many times, have that many rehabs, all of that. Like, you're just not going to be the same player, and he never was. So he hung on for a little bit, played, I think, 2 seasons with the Jags, and then he was out of the league. But yeah, just opportunity lost there just because of the injuries. All right, 2020 Bengals draft T. Higgins, second round pick out of Clemson. If you're on the YouTubes or whatever, I have my T. Higgins 5 T-shirt on. But a worthy candidate of number 85. He wears it for his first couple of seasons, or first 3 seasons in Cincinnati. In those 3 years is 85, 215 receptions, a little under 3,000 yards, 19 touchdowns. A worthy recipient of the 85. Again, if you're going under the Dallas model, where the best receiver gets that number, coming after Tyler Eifert, coming after Chad Johnson, yeah, like T would have been a representative of that. But I also think he felt the pressure of it too. Even though I think I heard that Chad was his favorite player growing up, he didn't want to have to follow in that legacy in Cincinnati. So maybe if he's in a different city, he probably, he takes 85 when he gets drafted, but maybe he keeps 85 if he was not someplace else besides Cincinnati, and he goes back to 5, which was his number at Clemson. T. Higgins would have been the MVP of that Super Bowl if they win. He's got those 2 touchdowns in the game. When healthy, and that's been the thing. He's a solid You could call him a 1B. Maybe he's a 2 wide receiver. It's hard to tell because of the injuries. But there are times, especially, when Jamar Chase is sometimes out himself, that T. Higgins will go out and absolutely dominate a game. His size, catch radius, all the things we said about Tyler Eifert, T. Higgins has that as well. He's not going to break away speed from you, but if you put it up in a 50-50, he's generally going to come down with it. And yay, he signed his franchise tag today. He'll be with the Bengals for this coming season. Will they give it a long-term contract? It's probably not looking like it's going to happen, but like a very good wide receiver, a very good 85, even though it was only for 3 seasons. But yeah, a quite the worthy contender of continuing the tradition of keeping that number 85. All right. So who's your top 85, y'all? Okay. Hold on. Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah. So who's your top 85s? Here's my top 5. Tyler Eifert, number 5. Again, primarily because of injuries. T. Higgins, number 4, only because he had the 3 seasons, even though 2 of those were 1,000-yard seasons, and his rookie year was 900 and some odd seasons. So pretty good. Going with Tim McGee at 3. Had a solid career as a number 85 for the Bengals. Also got to the Super Bowl as well. Didn't win it as well, but, he did really good. Isaac Curtis, again, the Bengals should have retired the number after he finished playing. Again, a Hall of Fame worthy player. Again, if bum-ass Lynn Swan is in, Isaac Curtis should be in. And then Chad Johnson's obviously number 1. Okay, he's your number 1 contender, the number 1 player. Again, he should be a Hall of Fame player as well. Again, the number of catches, the number of yards, what he did for this particular franchise, the city, all of that should factor in. That's what makes him number 1. These other guys are good football players. Chad Johnson was a good football player and a representative of the Cincinnati Bengals. He never shied away from it. He always represented the team the best way that he could on the field. Maybe sometimes a little bit shaky off the field, not criminally, but just in some of his actions and attitudes at times. But more than anything, he made it cool to be a Cincinnati Bengals fan. Absolutely cool. And it's one of the reasons that I bought that jersey. It's one of the reasons I'm probably still a fan, just hanging on because of Chad was one of the reasons I kept coming back. And that's it. So we're good, y'all. That's 85 days to kick off. Who are your top 85s? Rank them from 5 to 1. Let me know in the comments. We'll see you guys when we get to 84 there. A couple of worthy contenders in there for sure. It won't be Jermaine Gresham. Guarantee you that. I'll probably try to get Hutch on for that. So we'll see you when it's 84 days, y'all. Peace.